So I say that my next guest is one of the most successful sports people this country has produced. She is a multiple Olympic gold medalist, a multiple world champion in her cycling pursuit, and thereafter, following her retirement, she began to turn her hand to all manner of extraordinary challenges, the first of which was to ride in the Cheltenham Foxhunters with but a year's riding experience under her belt. Everybody said that it couldn't be done, but she proved them wrong, as she has done everybody throughout her entire life and career. She has just returned from a period surfing in Costa Rica, her latest daredevil challenge. Last year she attempted to climb Everest, which had some pretty significant consequences for her. She is one of the most interesting figures in sport, and I'm delighted to say she joins me now. Victoria Pendleton, CBE, welcome to Luck on Sunday.
Oh, thank you for having me.
And great to have you back in the racing fold after what's been 3 years. I can't believe it's 3 years since Pacha Du Polder in the Foxhunters.
No, I can't believe it either. I'm really excited about going to Cheltenham to watch the Gold Cup day, the last day, and to see the Foxhunters again. I wish I could go back and start from the beginning. I would 100% do it all over again, 1,000 times over. I loved it so much.
I mean, everybody said there was no way you could do it.
Yeah.
Even for all your dominance in your own sport, and a sport that has significant risk and significant danger and significant athletic prowess required. Nobody thought that you could actually complete the Cheltenham Festival.
I know, and I wasn't sure, to be honest, at the start. It was such an audacious challenge. You know, it was kind of, to even suggest it seemed ludicrous, but I loved every second of it. Within about 10 minutes of my first ever riding lesson, I was like, this is the most fun I've ever had. I knew instantly that I wanted to pursue it.
When you look back at this, can you actually remember each and every part of the race, or did it go by in a blur?
I mean, all races go by in a blur. The first time you ever race, they're going to try and enjoy it because it's going to be a blink and it's going to be over because you're focused on what you're doing. And there's certain parts of the race I remember, and I remember just really concentrating on my instructions, which were to sort of stay back, keep to the rail. Horses tend to fall out from the rail, and then the race will open up, and just give him a shout and a push. And that's what happened. I had no idea he was going to come so well at the end. If I'd known, I perhaps would have started a bit earlier, but oh, he's just so good. I love that horse so much. When I watch him, honestly, that was one of the greatest moments of my life, I can honestly say. I'm so happy.
I can see you're reliving it all. You look there in a state of complete shell shock.
Yeah, I mean, I think I was. I mean, ultimately, I was like, I want to get round in one piece.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't so much about looking for a result. Ultimately, everyone wanted me to be safe, and I was advised, you know, like, if you need to pull up, remember you can pull up. And I was like, I want to get round. I really want to get round. And I mean, Pacha Du Polder looked after me every step of the way, and it's about the horse and the right horse, and he was the right horse for me.
You were playing quite a high-stakes game, because you can't have been oblivious to the fact there were plenty of people saying she shouldn't be doing this.
Oh, yeah.
She's actually a danger not only to herself,
to the rest of the field, yeah.
but to everybody else. How did you cope with that?
Well, I made sure that I had the right people around me, coaching and supporting me, having the right team in Yogi Breisner, in Paul Nichols, in Alan and Lornie Hill, who were the point-to-point crew that I was training with them. And I left it up to them to decide whether they thought I was ready for it. And they're professionals. So if they just said, no, we don't think you're competent right now, I won't ride. And I was very comfortable with that decision and letting them, between themselves, decide whether it was appropriate or not. And there were some ups and downs, as there is with all manner of equestrian sport, in particular racing. But I was very pleased. I got 30 races under my belt before Cheltenham in that year, and I was so fortunate to be able to ride. And I feel so blessed and so honoured that someone up there was watching me and got me round. And the fact that having the opportunity to ride a horse like Pacha Du Polder, an absolute gentleman. I mean, I could school him in the fog with my eyes shut. He was very capable, very competent. He looked after me the whole way. So I feel very blessed to have been able to enjoy a ride with a horse as wonderful as he is.
To what extent did he and the whole riding experience fill a gap for you at the time that needed to be filled? Because you retired in 13, didn't you?
In 2012, immediately after the Olympics.
Immediately after the Olympics. So 13, but what I mean is 13 was your first year where there wasn't much happening apart from lots of media attention. In order to satisfy what you needed to do sort of physically and what you needed to do mentally, how much of a gap did he fill?
The whole Cheltenham Challenge was such a blessing. it gave me a structure to my day, and I was really, after sort of retiring from full-time sport, like having something to get out of bed for and train for and focus on was something I really missed. And I love having a challenge, and I enjoyed every second of it. And I was very willing to accept the risks and, you know, the injuries and everything that comes along with learning to ride horses. There's a small price to pay for the joy of being able to jump a horse over a steeplechase fence, because there's nothing quite like it. It feels like you're flying. It's an honour. I can't even express really how it makes me feel. I could honestly be sick with the joy of it sometimes. Like I've eaten all the Easter eggs before breakfast. It's just such a wonderful feeling. I don't know, and nothing in my life is ever compared to it. Like having that partnership with a horse is something very, very special. It's magical. It's otherworldly. You can't really explain it. It's something that sort of, it gets right into your heart. It's not something you just do like a sport and you train for it and it's fun, whatever. It's something that connection with a horse is something that is beyond words in many ways.
Could you ever get that high, for want of a better word, when you were cycling?
No way.
Not even close.
I mean, there's a sense when you achieve your goals and you're on the podium listening to your national anthem. It's a wonderful moment and a very special moment, and you feel it in your heart and your soul, and it's incredible. But riding a horse is very different. It makes you feel alive. It makes you feel like it's an extension of your body. It's incredible. I can't explain it. A bike is a machine, but a horse, that's another heart. It's something completely different. Without sounding too airy-fairy, it's something very, very different. And I can understand why people are so passionate about racing and passionate about horses and training. And it's difficult to explain unless you've done it. And if someone had tried to explain that to me beforehand, I would think they were talking rubbish, you know. But now I completely understand and agree that it's something that doesn't really compare. So special.
When you were cycling, did you experience significant adrenaline peaks and troughs, or did you have to try and keep, because you were a professional and you had so much pressure on, did you have to try and keep it incredibly even? Yeah,
I think because there was such high expectation of the performance of the team, we're a very, very successful team. There wasn't anybody on the cycling team who wasn't already an Olympic champion or a world champion. You step up into that squad and you're like, wow, the pressure is on. So very much it was all very expected, so the pressure and expectation was a load to carry.
Yeah.
And it's sometimes hard to appreciate and enjoy your success when you kind of are expected to, because you're always like, it's almost like, phew, got through that one, what's next? Rather than elation and joy. Whereas when you're riding a horse, you can't fully know or predict what's going to happen. My performances on the bike were calculated within a tenth of a second. On a horse, you're working with another brain there, and it, might not always go to plan. So it kind of alleviates that pressure and expectation in some ways, because you can only do what you can do in that moment with the horse, and hopefully you communicate in the right way. But it removed all the pressure. So when I went in to ride Cheltenham, of course I was nervous. I wanted to do a good job for everybody that had supported me along the way. But in some ways there was no pressure, because it's like a partnership. It was only 50% me and 50% Pacha, so I was like, well, we'll just see how this goes. We'll do our best, take each fence as it comes, let the fence come to us, and whatever will be, will be.
Of course, accompanying this journey was an enormous amount of attention, an enormous amount of people like me wanting to ask you questions and appearing on much greater television stages and having acres and acres of newsprint written about you, and you were very accommodating, you could do that. But then when you actually went to the races, you could see that intensity and focus that only a top sports person has. Is that instinctive, or do you find you can switch that button fairly easily between the two personae?
I think it's a trained skill, so it's something that I've learned over the period of my lifetime in sport, is learning when you go into that competition environment that you become incredibly focused and your blinkers are on, you take in nothing except what is absolutely necessary. It's like you switch the volume off for that moment and focus on yourself, because you have to, because you only have one chance to get it right. And that's just purely practice over a lifetime of competing in sport. And I think many people saw my Cheltenham challenge as unrealistic, without taking into consideration the mindset being a big part of it. Physically, quite a difficult thing to do, but I'm fit and I've got good balance, so that worked well. But ultimately, I think they underestimated the fact that I wasn't a novice going into this situation. I was someone who's experienced high pressure, high stakes many times before.
But anyone who's read anything about you, anyone who's read your book, anyone who's followed your career, anyone who's seen what you've done since then, anyone who's read about some of the difficulties that you faced, knows that if you're one thing, it's someone for whom can't doesn't really enter the equation. Where did that come from? Where did that start?
I don't know.
Is it just something you're born with?
It's an affliction.
Well, it is in a sense.
Yeah, it is. I mean, a lot of people have kind of suggested it's probably down to my upbringing. My dad's very tenacious and very strong, and he's always like, you know, just get stuck in and do it. You can do it, and you know, be aggressive and push through a race and just kind of attack every challenge with everything you have. Some may say it's because I've got a twin brother, so I've always had a sense of competition in my life. Like anything he can do, I want to do, and I want to do it better. But I don't really know. It's almost like unfinished business. I have to keep pushing forwards.
Two interesting things there. First of all, everyone knows that your dad was, you know, a go-getter, wanted you to succeed and was pretty ambitious. But 99% of people would have just dug their heels in at some point and gone the other way, because we quite often react against what our parents want to do. But you would just go with it. Well,
I remember some of my earliest memories of watching my dad race on the bike, road racing or hill climbs, and I was definitely, he definitely made an impression on me in terms of how he would approach racing. He was always attack on the hardest part of the race. He would get stuck in at the most brutal part. And I admired him for his sort of determination and tenacity. And that's something that I recognised very early on. I was like, I want people to view me when I turn up to a race like, oh no, we're racing for second. I want to feel that. I want to be that kind of energy that people are like, oh, Victoria's here. Yeah, we won't win today. I wanted to be that person so desperately. And, you know, people look at me and they underestimate me, and I was like, I'm going to prove them wrong. And that's always been a huge drive. It's, yeah, I can't really explain how I'm supposed to manage that, because it lives with me still. I want to do more things, try more things, do more challenges. It's non-stop.
Well, it's a constant level of management that you're going to have to apply to the rest of your life, which we'll talk about in a minute. You mentioned your twin brother.
Yes.
When you were growing up, did he have the same level of application?
No. I mean, when we were kids, we always used to play a lot of sport together. So, like, if we were on the summer holidays, we're like, should we go and play tennis? Should we do this? Just get the baseball bat out and just play, you know, make up games and build tree houses. So we always were very active and sporty. But fundamentally, when we went to race at the senior level, so after age 16 in cycling, you go to race with the seniors. So I had to race with the men. He was like, no, I'm not sure if I really want to do this, because the training obviously had to go up a huge amount, but also you go from being the best in your category to being at the very, very back, struggling to hold on, which is really difficult when you're a kid, basically, or a teenager, being constantly beaten easily, week after week after week, is difficult to take, it's difficult to swallow. But I just kept sticking with it, and I actually said I had a lot of help from the handicappers, because some cycle racers are sometimes handicapped, and they'd take one look at me and they're like, come forward a bit, come forward. And I'd be like, and then I'd be racing for my life, knowing I'd be chasing by a group of huge burly men who definitely don't want to see me win, but it definitely helped me get on my way.
Yeah, I presume that spurred you on in itself.
Yes, being chased by a huge group of men with their elbows out, I was like, yeah, racing for my life.
You've touched on this twice already. It's quite interesting. You want people's perception of you to be slightly different to what you actually are, and you've used that to your advantage.
Yeah, potentially, yeah. I would love to, you know, it's strange, I've been underestimated my entire life because of the way I look and come across, and everyone thinks, oh, she's small and she's nice, and wow, you're a lot smaller in real life than you look on the television, and just be like, okay then, less. And ultimately, all I want to be is more.
In what way?
Well, exceed people's expectations. I guess people do judge a book by its cover. Quite, you know, we try not to, but people do. And I think, oh, it isn't possible. Well, just because it hasn't been done before doesn't mean it's not possible.
So you had that determination that enabled you to do things like the riding challenge, and you've needed to keep finding replacements for that.
Yeah.
What's been the most fulfilling replacement for that thus far?
I mean, the whole Cheltenham challenge, I wish it could have carried on forever. I would love to be a jockey. In my next life, I want to be a jockey.
Well, I did notice your Wikipedia page says Victoria Pendleton, jockey and former cyclist.
Oh, does it?
Yes, which I did have a wry smile at. Jockey and former cyclist.
Yeah, that's gone first. I didn't realise.
Yeah.
If I was a bit younger, I would have loved to have pursued being a jockey. I would have absolutely loved to, because it just, it's the most fun.
But when you finished with that, why didn't you just carry on the next season?
I mean, there's not many places someone of my experience and, should we say, age can go, really, as an amateur jockey. I can carry on riding point to point, and I did ride point to point, had a pointer, I bought a new one to ride, and that was fun. But ultimately, it's a huge time commitment, and in order for me to own my horses and keep them, I need to work. So I was like, well, this is it's an expensive hobby. So unfortunately, financially, it didn't really make much sense.
The interesting thing is, self-evidently, there are 365 days in a year. When you were cycling 365 days of the year, pretty much all the time. Even if you are busy now, it's all a relative concept.
Yes.
So, and you are clearly not someone who takes very well to downtime.
No, I'm horrible in downtime.
So how now are you going to proceed and fill it?
Well, I don't know. I'd still, as strange as this sounds, I still want to get up that mountain.
Everest.
Yes. So I think maybe I'll give it a year or so and maybe consider going for that again. I don't feel like my mountaineering is over.
You were quite close to dying when you climbed Everest.
I did suffer from hypoxia.
But you were down at 20-30% oxygen saturation. And you're supposed to be at 90, well, anything below sort of 96 is a worry.
Yeah, yeah. So just the acclimatisation was, unfortunately, because the weather was so good, we had to cut about 2 weeks out of the preparation, which doesn't sound like a lot, but is a massive amount in terms of adaptation and your body adapting to altitude. But the weather window was looking so good, we had to go. And the team, I couldn't keep up with the pace that they were acclimatising, so I had to step down. And it's unfortunate. I think with enough time and preparation, I would have been okay. And I've spoken to some specialists since, and they agree with me. It was just a matter of timing.
You've not reconciled yourself to this, have you? It's the one thing in your life that hasn't quite gone...
Well, I think...
as you might have imagined in terms of a physical challenge,
physically, in terms of my physical preparation, I was really happy with the way I was climbing and with my speed through the icefall and things like that. I know it was in a good place, but just, unfortunately, when you're working towards a plan and it got changed at the last minute, you can't really do much about it. So it was more like the weather and the conditions that kind of hampered me. And you have to take heed when those things happen. It's not winning or losing. That's life or death. But I definitely would like to try again.
You've documented extensively that it's been an extremely difficult year, 18 months for you, and that you've had to fight your mental health challenges, which essentially have been rumbling away for most of your life.
Yes.
But they've come to a head. Do you think it's more because of the physical endurance of the Everest Challenge, or more because the Everest Challenge didn't happen, or it failed halfway through, that affected you? So
it's been sort of well documented that a lack of oxygen in terms of suffering hypoxia, so swelling on the brain and a lack of oxygen, can cause sort of depression and anxiety as a result of the inflammation and the physical effects that it has on your body. But also, I think I'd had a lot going on in my personal life, getting divorced, so that was also difficult. The Everest thing, well, I was disappointed, but physically I came down with quite ill in terms of chest infections, and I couldn't get rid of them, and I was on a heap of antibiotics, and just everything in life overflowed. I reached that point where I just couldn't contain everything, and also just lacking a sense of direction and all these things, like what do I do next? It was just too much, and it got to a point where I felt helpless, which is was really difficult because I've always felt someone who was very capable. I can do anything if I put my mind to it. You know, I've won Olympic gold medals. Why can't I just feel stronger today or more positive? But I just, you know, I hit rock bottom, and it took a long while to get myself back together. And, you know, I'm very lucky that I have a lot of supportive friends and family around me. But it was strange because I think people didn't expect somebody like me to sort of to suffer that badly. You know, like everyone has down days, but this was quite serious and kind of debilitating.
Because you've been so successful, and because you say you've been so determined, then suddenly the expectation changes, as you said, and everyone imagines that you're strong enough to push through these challenges. But when you're on your own, you know, literally and figuratively, it's an extraordinarily difficult place to be, whether or not you've had mental health challenges.
Yes, it is, and you know, having the horses was a big part of my recovery, as well as going surfing, which you mentioned earlier. So learning a new sport, having a new challenge, one that has a risk to it, has been kind of documented to improve resilience and improve mental health. So doing something that's slightly scary, and being in the ocean for me is, I'm not someone who's spent a lot of time in the ocean generally. I don't really like swimming too much, I'm going to admit. Open water swimming terrifies me. So being caught in a washing machine underwater in a wave set is quite scary, and that's the resilience that I think has helped me through. So
I'm getting the feeling that you deliberately chose something you felt least comfortable with. I'm going to find what I'm most scared of and challenge this fear. Yeah. Was that what drove you to do it?
Yes, and you know what? When you're out there paddling through a set, trying to get out back to catch waves, and the waves just keep breaking, and you just have to keep paddling and paddling and paddling, you're not thinking about what's going on inside your own head, because it's survival. It turns into survival. And that feeling of being focused on the one thing at that moment is almost like mindfulness, because you're not thinking about how you're feeling or how down you were this morning. You're thinking about, right, there's a wave breaking and I need to get over it before it breaks, because otherwise I'm going to be, you know, underwater in a washing machine, not knowing up from down.
It's funny because when a lot of people talk about mindfulness, they think of yoga, Pilates and whale music.
Yes.
This is a slightly more extreme extreme form of it.
Yeah, the same when you're racing a horse, when you're galloping a horse, you're not thinking about anything else except what that horse could be looking at, the speed you're trying to maintain, the next fence potentially. You're just fully focused in that moment, and that's the beauty of it. I think there's a similar essence in both of those sports, because nature is ultimately in control, and you have to be very aware of your decisions made at that moment based on what nature is offering you, whether that's a wave, whether that's a racehorse.
Do you feel more comfortable alone with nature, if you like, than you do surrounded by a room full of people with whom you have to make conversation?
I think so. I've definitely been someone who's spent a lot of time outdoors my entire life, and I do enjoy that. I do really enjoy being outdoors, working hard, whether I'm covered in mud, mountain biking, horses, just even like being in the garden. I know it sounds kind of it doesn't sound like the same pace of activities that I'm used to, but I'm definitely someone who likes to have my own space and time, and I think there's so much going on in my head sometimes. That space and time in nature is really important for me to just keep the balance.
What point in your life do you think, or do you hope, if ever it can be achieved, that you can reflect upon your incredible career, because it was an incredible career, no matter what you've done since, with satisfaction, pride, and just put it to bed?
Oh, I don't know. I constantly try and understand what it is that makes me feel this way and want to keep pushing forward, because it doesn't really make any sense. And it's very hard for me sometimes to relate to other people, and especially relate to potentially other women my age, because we're not in the same place. Because my mindset drives me to keep going for something that, I mean, I don't need to prove myself.
No.
I don't feel I need to prove myself, but yet I still search for that next adrenaline rush, the thrill, whether that's, at the moment, getting my motorcycle licence, whether it's something, it's got to be. Don't laugh at me.
I'm mentally ticking off all in my head.
Am I having a midlife crisis? Is that what we're saying? I think I might be.
I definitely don't think you are. It's simply always a question of trying to find the next thing, isn't it? To find the thing that's going to challenge you and keep you mentally in the place where you want to be.
I just want to enjoy every second that I've got on this planet. I feel very lucky to have had the opportunities I've been given through my sport in cycling, through giving that crazy opportunity to ride at Cheltenham Festival, to climb Mount Everest. I want to be someone who says, yes, please, I want to give that a go, regardless of the outcome, because life is too short.
And would you rather be remembered like that than be remembered as multiple Olympic champion and multiple world gold medalist?
Maybe, I think I would. Somebody who goes out and gives it a try.
Because you never struck me as someone who says, do you know I won X many medals? Or I won this many medals?
No, it's...
You wear those quite lightly?
I do. Yeah, I think it was... it always felt like a stepping stone, and I know that sounds incredibly arrogant of me to say that those kind of successes in sport could be a stepping stone, but I always felt there was something more out there. And if everything happened in my cycling career to allow me to meet racing, it was worth it.
And on that note, for the moment, Victoria Pendleton, thank you very much indeed. I know you're going to stay with us because Tim and Neil are going to come back, and we're going to talk a little bit more about what horses might do for the rest of time. Because I know you've got a new horse, haven't you?
I've got two ex-National Hunt horses at home. I'm retraining them.
More of that right after this.